Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to see so many people come here to hear about free software and how can we get even more out of it than we already do. What the brief Alexandra gave me for this event was, can you tell us about the experiences of other European countries and about EU policies with free software in the public sector? So that's what I'm trying to do. First, a couple of words about my organization, the Free Software Foundation Europe. We are a sister organization of the Free Software Foundation in the United States. We work across most European countries. Our work is based on 3 pillars: public awareness, telling everyone about free software who doesn't run away quickly enough; policy work at the United Nations level, at the European Union level, and in many European countries at the national level. I've had the pleasure of working with Mark on the UK things. I believe I've come across Flavia in Italy as well, and so it was very exciting to hear their detailed perspective on these countries. We've been trying to get the World Intellectual Property Organization into shape for many years now, and so that's my fun bit of the work. And we also have an extensive legal department where we help free software projects with legal questions, and facilitate the world's largest network of legal experts on free software. Which of these buttons? Oh, yes, the one with the big arrow. Okay. Why free software for the public sector? Why bother at all? Just to make sure we're on the same page. I'm sure most of you already know these things. Well, because it's the best fit for the public sector. Free software is software that you can use, study, share, and improve. And that means public bodies can shape it just the way they need it for their particular application. That means they can reuse it, so that taxpayers don't end paying up for this. End up paying for the same thing over and over and over again. Free software also is based on open standards, standards that anyone can implement in any software model, whether free or proprietary. And open standards does not mean this so-called FRAND, fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory licensing conditions. That's nonsense. Open standards means come and take it, and build it, and compete, and innovate. So open standards for the public sector, they give vendor independence. They mean you can switch to a different service provider whenever you feel like it, whenever you're unhappy, when you think you're not getting good value. And they mean that the citizens don't have to buy into a particular proprietary platform just to have access to government documents that they need to fill in. Tax declarations, in many countries, that's a fun thing. I know several free software companies that keep a one machine with a proprietary operating system around just to fill in their taxes and participate in tenders, but that's another thing. And from the public sector point of view, free software also has the distinct advantage that whatever you spend, or most of the money you spend on free software, is spent in your country, in your region, in your city. It's spent on the very people that you're raising it from. And I think that's a pretty fair approach. So trying to condense what we've learned from looking at many European countries into 3 lessons. The first thing I would say is policies are great, and nothing happens without policies. But policies alone don't make anything happen. So you have to do something about them. You have to go and implement them. You have to make sure that people stick to them, that they know how to execute them. You have to help people to do that. The Netherlands are a case in point. In 2002, 2003, they introduced the so-called motie Wendricks, the Wendricks motion in Parliament, saying by 2006, all public sector IT should be based on open standards. And a friend of mine, Mathieu Pabst, just defended his PhD thesis. Mathieu, if you're watching this, congratulations. And he concludes that, well, that didn't go so well. Mere use of legal instruments is not enough to change behavior, meaning, in non-scientific words, most people just ignored it. Nothing happened. And that was because people didn't know about it. That was because the people who knew about it resisted it. And that was because the policymakers who were in charge of making this policy and then also should have seen it through, really, because they didn't pay attention. And they didn't ask, what can we do to actually make this happen, this thing that we're asking people to do? So for that reason, I'm as excited as Mark about the changes in the UK, and I'm as excited as Flavia about the new policies in Italy. But I've also learned to not praise the cook until I've tried the food on the table. And the food hasn't arrived yet. Portugal, same case. They've just decided that the only official document interchange format for the public sector should be ODF, the Open Document Format, which is great, absolutely. And now I'm looking forward to seeing that work in practice, and we'll help make it happen. As Mark pointed out, procurement is of the essence here, because that procurement is the bit where the government gets to put its money where its mouth is. And so the success of any free software policy for the public sector must be measured by how much money gets spent on free software in the end. And I'll talk about that in the recommendations bit later on. The second lesson is that policies are nice, but political will is critical, and political will is different from policies. Policies are one decision that you push through once, and then manage not to have shot down later. Political will is an ongoing effort. You need to keep doing it. We've seen a number of migrations in the public sector. I'm just naming two here, Freiburg in Germany and Helsinki in Finland, where the political gremiums decided that there should be a migration to free software. Both cases were open office, in fact. And the IT people didn't feel like it. So things got very difficult, and there were problems at every turn, and the software wasn't good enough, and it just didn't work right. And people were unhappy, well, because they were unhappy because there was no support for the software, and all these things. And eventually, the politicians said, well, this isn't working. Let's skip it. Let's go back to the proprietary vendor. Now, that for a politician is failure. You've been ignored. Your rules have been ignored. You've just been made a laughingstock. So go and get your stuff together and do it again. Now, one group that did it right was, one place that did it right was Munich in Germany, where they've been fortunate enough to have political backing for the past 10 years or so. I hear you're curious about the status of Munich's migration, because some companies, especially those that lost business there, like to say it's not going so well. In fact, it is. We have frequent contacts with them. So they have now 15,000 desktops. That's most of their desktops using Firefox, Thunderbird, and free software office suites, plus the Wolmux template system. Wolmux is a constructed word. The Germans have an expression for something that does everything. It's called an egg-laying wool milk pig. And that is what this system is supposed to do. And it's free software. It's available under the European Union public license. And any public administration that has a problem with templates and macros can go and download that to solve the problem. 11,000 of those desktops in Munich are running on free software, on a free software operating system. And the migration should be finished this year. Now, why have they been taking so damn long? One thing is because they're Germans and they like to do everything very properly. Which is a good thing in a way. The other bit is that it's not just a migration. They are also restructuring the cities, the whole city's IT departments. They used to have 22 or 23 IT departments, have fun managing that, and now they're bringing it down to 3 or 5. So that's what's happening at the same time, which is a major reason why it takes so long. And when I spoke to the project lead there a few months ago, she said, you know, these days all I'm working on is procurement. I'm trying to I need to teach our procurement people how to buy free software because they don't know how to do that. It's not that they don't want to, but they just don't know how. And so that's, again, a sign that the key problem is being attacked. And Munich only managed to pull through because they've had consistent political backing, because they've had a clear goal, which is vendor independence, not cost savings, vendor independence. They did manage to save costs, though. And because they did a great job of planning and executing. Sorry, I'm having a bit more trouble than I thought, keeping these two in sync. So, and the third lesson is that free software, yes, it's an ethical decision. Yes, it's a technical decision. And it's a matter of economic policy. And that, speaking to people involved in policy and speaking to people running businesses and talking to politicians is the most important point to remember. The buying decisions of the public sector and the policy decisions of the public sector decide on the future of the high-skilled, high-tech sector in your country. Spain has been finding out about this because they were one of the first countries to take free software as a policy tool. Extremadura is one of the poorest and, excuse me for saying this in that way, if any Spanish, if any extremeños are in the room, okay, I have to be careful now. One of the least developed regions in Spain, they've had long, well, it's difficult to do business, or it's been difficult to grow businesses there. But that meant that they had to come up with creative solutions. So more than 10 years ago, when they needed computers in schools and they couldn't afford proprietary licenses, so they took Debian GNU Linux and adapted that and put that on computers, and then started putting that into the public administration too, and then started preparing a variant for businesses too. And then businesses started supporting that and making money on that. And then the neighboring, much bigger province of Andalusia took that up, did the same thing, which meant that suddenly there were lots of free software businesses in Andalusia. At one point, an Andalusian government official got on stage and said, you know, in Andalusia we lost the industrial revolution, we missed it. But we're not going to miss the digital revolution, that's why we do free software. So, and then a funny thing happened. And Andalusia has, within Spain, sometimes has the image of being a bit laid back and good parties working. Whereas the Basque country in the very north has the opposite image. The parties, they are actually very good, but it's not in their image. So they have this very hardworking reputation. And then a funny thing happened. The free software companies in the Basque country noticed that their government wasn't buying any free software from, or any services from them. It wasn't supporting them. And every time the government put out a tender for free software services, they ended up buying from an Andalusian company because these companies were more experienced, because they had more business from their own government. And so the Basque companies did the right thing. They went to the government and said, hey, you need to change this. You need to introduce a free software policy around here. So you want to have a technology sector tomorrow, you do that today, and they did. So last summer, they introduced a rule that any software that has been developed with public funds needs to be made available to the public as free software. You can have some exceptions, and yes, it's still a policy that needs implementation, but the platform is up there, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing that work out. So that's one measure I would definitely recommend taking everywhere. I'm looking forward to seeing that adopted more widely. What about the overall EU? I don't see a consistent policy there, and maybe it's because I haven't been reading enough stuff, but maybe there isn't. The European Commission, Neelie Kroes, the Vice President, Commissioner for Digital Agenda, says many nice things about free software and has been very supportive. Other parts of the Commission, not so much. Just in November, there was a workshop about standards and patents that was basically geared towards letting the European Patent Office publish its rather conservative opinion on the matter. So we were rather disappointed about that. The European Commission itself has issued some guidelines in favor of free software and open standards, and then they've been at the same time buying Microsoft's products for 20 years without a public call for tender. And I don't know how they managed to do that legally. They must have some very good lawyers, but I wish that a big free software company would go and complain. Now, they have some good initiatives like JoinUp, interoperability portal for the public sector, and the European Union public license, not like we needed another free software license, but this helps people in the public sector get approval from their bosses to publish things as free software, so that's great. At the Parliament level, they're also taking some baby steps. We're helping them release an application, hopefully this summer, if things don't break down as they want to in the Parliament. But then the parliamentarians made a very unfortunate decision just in November when they decided to introduce a unitary patent system for Europe, meaning that now our system, at least on software patents, is going to be just as good as in the United States, where industry wants it desperately reformed because it's just so annoying. France, I'm not going to say much on France because every person in this room knows more on France than I do. But as far as I can see, France is definitely a leader on using free software in the public sector, so that's very good. Every time I see news about another big French government agency adopting free software, I'm very happy. But there's much more that can be done, and I'm getting to that, especially in terms of the very, very vibrant community, and that includes businesses that you have here. You could use it to so much better effect. So how? One thing first is to fix procurement. The first simple thing to do is make sure there are no brand names in calls for tender. If there's a European regulation that says technical specifications in calls for tender shall not refer to any specific make or source, and that means if it says, if somebody's buying processors and it says Intel in there, then that's probably wrong. So if you see a tender with a brand name, check it. If you run a company, complain, you might be excluded. It might be that you're being excluded from the tender illegally. That's what I'm saying. I hope you will not be excluded from the results afterwards. Then, as far as I know, there about 75% of IT money and IT business from the French public sector goes towards large integrators. That figure is too high. Please make sure that small, medium enterprises have a fair shot. That can be done in several ways. One is to break up huge contracts into smaller lots. A small enterprise will not be able to service a 100 million euro contract. But if you break it down into 10 million euro contracts and then help them get together in consortia, which is what they're already doing, great. Then that's good. You can have lighter regulation on SMEs. If it's just a 100,000 euro contract, and it's free software, so any other service provider can take over. You don't need stacks like this of forms to safeguard against that particular supplier going out of the market. So consider.
Yes. Yeah. If you can go.
I'm getting very close to finishing.
Thank you so much.
The second thing is to make your policies last. Policies are decisions. Decisions can be reversed. France has had a very pleasant ministerial decree recently that the public sector should prefer free software, and that's good, but decrees can be superseded by other decrees, so it's better to turn that into a law. And it's also, the more you get open standards entrenched in the public sector, the easier each subsequent migration will be. And if we really want to do it right, we need a European directive on software reuse across all public sectors in the countries. And then that's one thing where I don't see France in the lead, unfortunately, is copyright issues, where some French agencies, I don't know exactly which, are taking a very restrictive stance on copyright to the extent that it becomes a piece of red tape for free software companies, which ordinarily have very little problems with copyright, because that's what free software licenses are for, right? So, for example, VLC, the media player through which many of us are enjoying today's live stream, they're one of the most widely used free software media players, or the most widely used free software media player, and that's because it'll play anything you throw at it. Now, they would love to make it play Blu-ray discs too, and they've asked Adobe for guidance on how to do that. Adobe has, I understand, not responded in a timely fashion. I think they might be about a year late. Yes, year, okay. So perhaps there's someone in this room who can do something about that and make sure that one of France's most innovative development projects gets the reply it's legally entitled to, so it can move forward on this issue. And then France has also some great laws and rules on seizing the bundling of proprietary software with consumer hardware. And there's been some court rulings on that. But I understand it's still very difficult to actually return, when you buy a computer, to return a license for an operating system, a proprietary operating system that you don't want, to the shop and get reimbursed. Who's done that successfully here? Who's tried? Okay, what happened? Oh, that's a coincidence. The cost of shipping back the laptop was equivalent to the reimbursement. Now, well, good. I'm sure that's very consumer friendly. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you very much.